Maintenant que le micro est branché, je vais re-souhaiter la bienvenue à Matija Milicic, étudiant doctorant à l'université de Radboud aux Pays-Bas, qui va nous parler, comme je le disais en anglais, du thème Education and Migration, Coptic Youth and Belonging between Europe and Egypt. Et pour ceux qui ne parlent pas l'anglais, qui vont méditer durant cette conférence, je traduis juste le titre en français. Donc, éducation et migration, la jeunesse copte et l'appartenance entre l'Europe et l'Égypte. Thank you, Matija.
Thank you. Let me hope you can hear me well. Yeah, I'm tall, so hello everyone, and thank you first for organizing this conference and for having me here, and also for being able to speak in English. And I hope you can engage with me afterwards, and I will be happy to reply to any of your questions. So without further ado, I can start. Perfect. This is, you already heard the title and the title of my presentation today. So this comes from just a kind of background. I'm doing a PhD research on Coptic Orthodox communities in Europe, focusing especially on the Netherlands and Italy. And this part focuses on Sunday schools and education, church education in the Coptic communities. So during one of my first visits to Coptic churches in the Netherlands at the beginning of my project in early 2020, I visited a Coptic church in The Hague. And when I spoke to some of the members of the community about activities and their practices, I spoke to a first generation Copt, and I asked him if there are Sunday schools in the church. So he was very happy and with the question and responded with assurance and said, of course, otherwise there will be no need for a church. So during my subsequent visits to other churches in the Netherlands and Italy, I came to discover that youth and children and youth are really in the center of many activities and projects of the church, of many churches in diaspora. Yeah, I have to. So Habib Girgis, some of you probably know who he is, the founder of the Sunday School movement in the Coptic Church, Orthodox Church in Egypt, saw children as the nation of tomorrow and congregation of the future church. So during this period, at the beginning of the 20th century, youth started to be seen, and later on in the 20th century, they started to be seen as the nucleus of the Coptic community, who were to carry the reform and revival movement of the church. And today they continue to play a central role, even outside Egypt. So just thinking about youth and religion, and especially in Western Europe, we know that there's this idea about, because of secularism, that youth are not religious as before, and they don't practice their religion or go to the church very actively. And these views are also shared by many Copts in Europe. But at the same time, I was also in my conversation with members of the community, I was told that the Coptic Church is one of the one of few ones that was actually able to keep the youth in the church. Well, of course, they're not the only ones, but then I started thinking about this question: how are they actually able to keep the youth? So I'm also starting from this point, looking at the importance of church as an institution and of education for shaping and defining young people's everyday practices, and also about their religious identities. So as I said, I focused on the Coptic Orthodox communities in the Netherlands and Italy. And even though there are many differences, of course, in how these communities are shaped and how they practice their religion because of the local dynamics, I will here highlight similarities between these communities, as to show the importance, like to how to look at diaspora Coptic communities and what is crucial for them when it comes to youth. So regarding this topic, some of the main questions that I focused on, as I said already, how is the church approaching the issue of keeping the youth inside like church boundaries? What kind of belonging is being constructed among the second generation Copts, and what is it based on? And how do church leaders keep the youth on the right way? Also, especially when we talk about migrant communities, in this context, how is the connection to Egypt and its traditional church life and practices kept in this context? And then I will also, especially related to the topics and the main line of this conference, how the church also conceptualizes and understands the concept of diaspora and what it means. Just as a background, I will give a very brief overview of the Coptic communities in Europe, and especially in the Netherlands and Italy. So Coptic migration to Europe in bigger numbers started in 1950s and 60s, but especially in the in those times, many Copts traveled to North America, Australia, and Europe because they received the scholarships. But in the 70s and 80s, more and more Copts started to migrate, and this is also true for Egyptians in general. And when we think about the reasons why they migrated, it's usually shared by all Egyptians, so Muslims and Christians alike, looking for better conditions of life to kind of escape poverty and political tensions, especially in this period. And some, of course, we have to say that some Copts experienced religious discrimination based on religion, religious belonging. So they had some of them had an extra reason to emigrate. Today, the biggest communities, Coptic communities, can be found in the United Kingdom, France, Austria, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and most of Western European countries today host at least one Coptic church. When we talk about the Coptic community in the Netherlands, it was officially established in 1985 in Amsterdam, and that was the establishment of the first church. Today, it's led by Bishop Ambar Seni, and they have more than 10 priests who serve 11 Coptic parishes in the Netherlands. We don't know the exact number of Copts because it's difficult to register religion and ethnicity, and but according to the diocese, there are around 10,000 Copts. But based on earlier estimates, it is safe to say that the community is growing. The Coptic community in Italy is, as I said, one of the largest in Europe, and it was established in the 1980s and increasingly in the 1990s. It's interesting that Italy has two dioceses. One is centered located in Milan in the north, and the other one is in Rome. The community in Milan is larger, and according to different estimations, they have at least 10,000 members, which also explains a bit, reflects the general wave of migration to the north of Italy, which is also common among Italians themselves. A lot of people from south of Italy also migrate to Milan and other cities in the north. So also, as I said, I will just reflect on the ideas of this term diaspora, which is contested often, especially, as I said, since the 1970s and 80s, when the kind of transnational Coptic Church was established, there was this need to address this issue, and Coptic communities outside of Egypt were increasingly defined or described as diaspora communities. And starting from the late previous Pope, Coptic Pope Shenouda, he opposed this term. So because he saw the issue of the concept of diaspora as problematic because it has a negative connotation, and it was connected to the ideas of exile, dispersion, and displacement, which he saw that it like as unapplicable to the Copts. But the term itself in English is still used by many people, but not in Arabic. Like the term shatat is never mentioned anywhere. Also in conversations, no one would mention that. But those who speak English would, without a problem, say diaspora, Coptic diaspora. You can see, some of you who read Arabic in his first visit to the Coptic, to the Catholic Pope, not trying to do anything here. In 2013, Pope Tawadros, current Pope, Coptic Pope, said that he's visiting all Egyptians and not only Copts. So he's also, in many interviews, he asserted that he's against the term diaspora and even the Arabic, like Aqbat al-Mahbar, the Copts of, sometimes in English they translate it to lands of immigration, because first of all he doesn't want to see Muslims and Egyptian Muslims and Christians as separate, which reflects the kind of the national rhetoric in Egypt, and also because there's this idea that the Copts are connected and they always migrate from and to Egypt, which is not which is a bit contested. We already now have established communities and with second, third generations, and who are probably not going back to Egypt. Maybe just the second photo is related to the maybe general image of, especially when it comes to youth and children, because when we talk about migrants and especially youth, we many scholars, and we usually call them second generation migrants, and we call them migrants, but at the same time, I mean, they're not migrants themselves. They were born in these Western European countries or wherever they settled. So I would agree with this idea that we should make a distinction between first generation and second generation. And when we talk about Italy in particular, there's this organization, Retrouvez, and it consisted of they would say about themselves that they are children of immigrants and not immigrants themselves, and also that they are second generation of immigration and not second generation immigrants. So there's this need to address the issue that they shouldn't be seen as migrants, and that they're fully belong to their societies. Now, when we talk about the education in the church and youth, I will just give you a short introduction or historical background of the Sunday school movement, which was founded, as I said, by Habib Girgis. He was a layman and the later dean of the Coptic Orthodox Seminary in Cairo. So in order to protect Coptic Orthodox children from the growing influence of Western missionaries during the late 19th century, and to offer an Orthodox alternative to the missionary schools, which were seen as a threat to Orthodoxy and the teachings of the Coptic Orthodox Church, Girgis started gathering children for informal Bible reading meetings at the end of the 19th century. Besides fighting the influence of these Western missionaries, Protestant and Catholic, one of the principal motives for establishing a Coptic equivalent of American Sabbath schools was to offer Coptic children Christian education, which Girgis saw as a means for Copts to reclaim their communal identity. So he saw it as a very as a central element for their religious, but also in general, more broadly, their identity. So there were four, according to Habib Girgis, there were four main goals of Sunday schools. First, Girgis envisaged Sunday school as a way to strengthen children's connection to church life by encouraging them to attend the Sunday liturgy, to receive Holy Communion, and worship regularly. Sunday schools were also teach the children about their faith, history of Christianity and of the Coptic Church, its tradition, rites, and saints. Then children were to learn about Christian virtues. So, for example, through stories about saints and martyrs, and be brought up in a true Christian spirit. Lastly, religious education was supposed to develop and strengthen young Coptic communal identity by promoting the importance of community service, for example, by participating in various charitable projects and serving those in need. So in this time, Coptic children were taught to be full members and active members of the church, and to be actively connected to their faith and to their community in their everyday lives. In later years, Coptic Church started to involve children and youth in its activities more and more. For example, with regular Bible study meetings and volunteering activities. And this is how the church, starting in the 1940s and 50s, established the practice of khidmah, or church service, which yielded a new intergenerational order with committed, authorized adult laity as church servants, so for them, and new generations who are to be served, makhdumin. So the church further attracted more young people in its institution by, for example, offering financial and social support. And also Pope Shenouda established the Bishopric of Youth in 1980, which was seen by some scholars as a move to defend the church and youth from potential dangers, external dangers, and also to keep them inside church boundaries and to kind of control any type of opposition or resistance by young Copts. So now moving to the diaspora communities, I will continue using this term. Officially, so Pope Shenouda renamed Sunday school or Sunday school education into, well, in Arabic, Tarbiyah al-Kanasiyya, which is something like church upbringing. One of the reasons was that it had this connotation with with Protestants. So to have like another version. So when the first migrants from Egypt established church parishes in their new country, they also made sure to provide Sunday school education and other activities for the youngest members of the community, which was sometimes seen as a kind of a communal duty. So besides this, many church leaders when they establish new communities, they want to preserve and transmit this tradition from Egypt. So in my conversations with several Coptic Sunday school teachers in Italy and the Netherlands, we talked about the main goals of such programs and activities. So they mostly talked about Sunday schools as important for the community and the identity of the members of the community, as a way to teach children from an early age the principles of the Orthodox faith, to transmit this faith to the children, to maintain the link with the church, its tradition and history, and also to safeguard the faith from external dangers, which is similar as in older times, and to make the children closer to God as much as possible. Uniquely to the diaspora context, so these migrant Sunday schools become places for cultivating ties to Egypt and its Christian heritage among second and third generation Copts. So children and youth of different ages are part of these educational and socialization activities and programs. So they enter from very early age, when they're even 3 years old, as like a kind of a kindergarten program in the church, and to university students in their late teens and early 20s. For these later older groups of youth, kind of reflecting the practice of practice in Egypt, students graduate from Sunday schools and enter the preparation to become servants. And then they serve their younger church members. So they are not, these preparation classes are not obligatory, but they're highly recommended. And one girl that I spoke to in the Coptic church in the Netherlands told me that she wants to teach little kids and give them something that she was given when she was a child. And she said she could, even though she could leave the church after the liturgy, enjoy her free time, she feels that it's her duty to serve the church and its youngest members. So there's this need for some kind of continuity of tradition and practices from the mother church in Egypt, and also more generally for continuity of the whole community itself. Some examples of youth activities that are not part of Sunday schools in the narrow sense. So these youth activities also include different ages. They're generally meant to bring children and youth together, and then they vary also to what extent they involve religious practice at their core. Some of these are youth meetings, Bible study groups, spiritual days, choirs, different kind of trips, sports activities and competitions, summer and Christmas camps, and youth conferences. So all of these activities differ in their subject matter and nature, ranging from let's say strictly religious ones, such as Bible study groups, to more secular ones. They all have something in common. They are meant to socialize the children and youth into the church life and actively include them in its institutional body. So, for example, also when it comes about these conferences, they highlight the transnational aspect of the Coptic community, because the church organizes conferences for youth in Europe. So from every diocese in Europe, they come together every year in one city. And also Pope Tawadros organizes a youth conference in Egypt, where Copts from all around the world go to Egypt and kind of connect with their peers. And the kind of the slogan or the motto of the conference is "Back to the Roots." So there's this need to stay connected to the homeland. So on the whole, Coptic Church upbringing programs incorporate two practical principal elements of education. These are talim and tarbiya aspects. So both the transmission of knowledge, but also to teach children how to either to behave or kind of what are the correct values to be respected. The main themes that are covered in the program, in the Sunday school education and other activities, are Bible study, history of Christianity and the Coptic Church, hagiographies, church dogma and Christian teachings. Also, sometimes they have Arabic and Coptic lessons, and also like singing lessons, like alhan and taraneen songs in Arabic, Coptic, and local languages. And it's important to know that the education is fully in local languages, so in Dutch and Italian, which is actually these are the first languages of second and third generations, and also it's a part of a kind of adaptation projects of the church to cater to the needs of the youth. I'll just maybe skip some parts. When it comes to the materials used, they use a standardized curriculum in the Sunday school education, but also additional materials such as books by Shenouda, which is very important to kind of transmit to preserve the tradition of the church in Egypt. Also sermons and other online materials, which are very common now, and many churches don't print their materials anymore, but it's becoming more and more digital. And also this aspect highlights this transnational element of the community, because they use a lot of kind of universal Coptic websites and sources online. So in a way, it's like a means to stay connected to the community wherever they are, to Egypt and with other diaspora communities. So these are just examples of the curriculum, and then lessons of Coptic and Arabic for all children, and just an example of a bookshop in the church, in the Coptic church in Amsterdam. So what kind of learning is created in Sunday schools among the Coptic children and youth, but also more broadly among the community members? So many Copts referred or used what I call narratives of difference and sameness when they talked about their belonging. So, for example, they engaged in conversations about the relationship between the community and the outside world. So there's usually this idea that our culture and their culture, and this culture of the host society is usually seen as very secular, liberal, too liberal, modern, and host societies, in this case, the Netherlands and Italy, are both seen as kind of lacking religion in their public sphere. At the same time, this has allowed many Copts to kind of work together with other communities, religious communities, especially Christians, who share their struggles and challenges kind of against the secularization, and to keep the youth inside their boundaries. So many members of the communities talked about the separation between two worlds, so the one inside and one outside, and that they are often incompatible with each other. One of the Sunday school teachers in Milan told me that they, particularly because of this, they focus in Sunday schools on teaching the Bible and Orthodox tradition, which is seen as a kind of a way to protect values, traditional values of the church, and to set boundaries: what is correct, what is incorrect, what is Orthodox, what is not Orthodox, or even sometimes what is heretical. At the same time, as I said, in order to kind of strengthen ecumenical ties, as well as their sense of belonging in the wider Christian family, and to expand their religious practices beyond their ethnic congregations, many Dutch and Italian Copts participate in different pan-Christian or pan-Orthodox activities and events. So in these activities, a common aspect of belonging is identified and further strengthened by focusing on the narratives and elements of things. So there's something shared between them. These include very belonging to the same religion, in this case Christianity, or specific denomination, for example, Orthodox or Oriental Orthodox. Also sharing similar challenges, such as keeping the youth against the backdrop of secularization, and often sharing similar stances regarding social and moral issues in the society. Some of these activities include official ecumenical relations and meetings, pastoral care services, educational initiatives, joint choir concerts and prayers, just to name a few. In some of these activities, children and young adults are the main target group, such as especially choir groups, where they have the opportunity to kind of symbolically address or strengthen their belonging to the church when they sing about saints or different parts of church history. In these cases, it's important to know that, well, as I said, in many activities, it goes beyond the kind of ethnic, strictly having activities in their ethnic or ethno-religious boundaries, but then it exceeds to more general and Christian identities. So when they say, for example, our culture or our values, or in so different songs, or even in Sunday school classes, one Sunday school teacher said we should take saints as our role models, and we should be more like saints. We can also understand it as a like belonging to the wider Christian family, not only to the Coptic itself. Also, just to mention that we don't have only these kind of siding against or with certain groups, but many church leaders are aware that many young Copts, so especially those second generation, third generation Copts, also these whole societies are their societies, and they also have this kind of dual identity. So they are both Coptic or Egyptian and Dutch or Italian. So one Coptic priest in the Netherlands told me that one of the main projects in their church is to create a balance among second generation Copts, a balance between a kind of traditional Coptic values and the ones that are seen as too liberal for them in many Western societies. And this also reflects what a famous Coptic priest and theologian, Thomas Malati, said about migration. Who wrote that the Copts living in Western countries should be focused on adopting the most constructed aspects of their whole societies while still practicing their spirituality of the East without any contradiction. So he saw that still this balance is possible. So just to conclude with some ideas, it seems that Copts, but also other migrant communities, have this like a double challenge. First, especially first generation migrants, they need to adapt to the local culture and their new societies and their norms and dynamics, but also at the same time to this secularization, which is seen as something against their religious identities and practices. And this is also shared by many other religious groups, also including local major mainstream, let's say, like the Catholic Church in Italy, who also see the issue of keeping the youth as one of the biggest challenges in their daily goals. So I would just also quote priest Father Malki again when it comes to migration of Copts. He said that migration of the Copts from Egypt added an extra responsibility to the mother church of Egypt that has to take care of their children abroad, that they may become witnesses of orthodoxy. So there is this constant or even strength and need to preserve tradition or orthodoxy in this context, which is seen by many members as very fragile to these external dangers. And although some scholars have argued we live in an age where social categories and boundaries are contested and are very blurred. It is actually in this environment that the Coptic Church is let's say extra committed or determined to safeguard its communal confines and boundaries and define its identity categories. So what is good, what is bad, what is orthodox, who belongs to the church and who does not. So it is a very conscious effort to minimize some kind of diversification and blurring of these categories in order to secure the survival of the community. And looking at these educational socialization activities in the Coptic churches in the Netherlands and Italy, as well as most probably in other countries, we can say that still the church plays an important role for many young people, even though there's a different image kind of in the public sphere, and this is definitely true for the Copts. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you a lot, Matija, for this very rich subject. It's a great bridge to our next and activity with the Reverend Fathers, and I will ask them about some themes you talked about. I have two small questions to ask you. First, so you said they don't say diaspora in Arabic.
Yeah.
They don't say shatat. You use the word shatat and not al-hijra. Or it's the same, both of them are used. Both of them can be hypothetically used, shatat and hijra, or it's something different for the Copts?
I think it's different. So of course, hijra is like kind of a
excuse
me. I mean, well, linguistically, hijra it's more like kind of a process, like a phenomenon in that sense. But then, so the equivalent would be mahjar, which is used. So it would be something, well, if we try to really understand it and translate it, kind of a place of immigration. But the main idea of, so it is different from diaspora because of this, for example, the original meaning of diaspora, going back to the Jewish diaspora, which has this idea of dispersion, exile, which doesn't really apply to the Copts. And I think also in one way, church leaders, well, starting from Approche and Oda, I think he didn't want to kind of, one thing he didn't want to speak of as like kind of victims. Of course, they didn't go through the same well, developments, let's say, as other communities like Syriacs, Lebanese, Armenians. But on the other hand, I think there's this need to also to kind of connect all the Copts and look at them as belonging to the Coptic Church wherever they are. So not to have Copts in Egypt and Copts in diaspora. But also there was this big problem at the end of 20th century where first communities especially in the US, but also in Canada, they were very politically active, which didn't have good resonance and reaction back in Egypt. So that probably these are the most common.
So if you want. No. So they speak English, they say diaspora. They speak Arabic, what do they say?
So Mahgar, they would say in Arab, yeah.
It was taboo.
So no, so one thing I just want to emphasize is that even in English diaspora, it's used by some people, of course, who are aware of the term, and especially Mahgar. But I would say that especially church leaders, they would have these stances. For example, Pope Shenouda and now Pope Tawadros, who says that he doesn't agree with Akbat and Mahgar Copts of the lands of immigration. But at the same time, of course, first of all, for mostly practical reasons, people they refer to the Coptic communities outside of Egypt as Mahgar. And it's also this term itself doesn't have a negative connotation. So it is used, and even in some books, printed and published by the church. But I think it's more about this kind of concept and idea of having understanding Copts living outside of Egypt as very separate from those communities in Egypt.
So Egypt remained the motherland, like Lebanon for Maronites?
Yeah, but also when it comes to what is defined as diaspora, one of the usually criteria are this idea of kind of coming back, to Egypt, which doesn't seem that exists among Copts. So of course, these ties, cultural, traditional ties to Egypt, are cultivated, but at the same time, there is no idea that one day we'll go back, or some kind of movement, it's not. Probably there are people who feel that. I cannot speak for but on the kind of larger level, there isn't such a idea.
Thank you. Est-ce qu'il y a une très petite question, très très brève, parce qu'il faut que nous passions à notre dernière séquence. Qui souhaite poser une question? Michel? Bref. Ça change les rôles. Hein?
Briefly, do we have an idea of the impact of the secular context on the young people, Coptic people?
That's a big question.
Because we talk a lot about the protection of this Coptic identity.
Yeah, so I mean, it's very, of course, individual. Like if you talk to many people, they they live their lives, and of course, like their practices, everyday practices, cannot be controlled by the church, and also, as I said, like priests and bishops, they're aware of this issue. So in that sense, in some for example, one priest in Milan told me that they don't want to kind of force or push some things too much with the youth, because that will kind of turn them away. So in that sense, they are aware of these developments, and they know that they will also be friends with, you know, whoever in the school. And for example, when I talked to some young people in the church, they told me that, for example, yes, I go to a bar and have a drink or two. This doesn't mean that I'm not Christian, that I'm not believer, that I cannot go to the liturgy, you know, these things. So this is very common, and I think church leaders are aware of that. But of course, I mean, it's a bit difficult to know to what extent this, well, if we can say secularization, to what extent it affected the number of people going to the church. So of course, some young people stopped going, you know, but especially with these activities, they try to socialize them as much as possible, you know. So, but yeah, it's, I mean, yeah, it's a very interesting, big question. So it's a bit difficult to really pinpoint where the secularization comes, you know.